evening and welcome to Thai PBS World Tonight. Coronavirus news does not have to be about how people around the world is in despair in fighting this pandemic, because in fact we can look at the situation from the brighter side, especially on how people around the world adapt to this reality, especially in staying at home and try to connect to one another. Thai PBS World Tonight talked to James Longman, ABC correspondent. He told us how he keeps looking for good coronavirus news. So James, how are things in London?
Well, it's obviously an uncertain time for everybody. You know, it's difficult. Britain is going to be probably the most hard-hit country in Europe. So it's uncertain. We've just had Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, in hospital. He went into the intensive care unit, but now, thankfully, he's out of danger. And Britain is trying to figure out, you know, how long it's going to be before life can go back to normal, I think. So like lots of other countries.
And you have your own column, Good Coronavirus News. And how do you discover good news about coronavirus?
Look, I think whenever there's something negative happening, whenever something difficult happens, people always respond in an amazing way. It doesn't matter what the story is, there's always good that happens. People all are at home now, stuck, thinking of creative things to do. So they're using Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and they're sharing lots of exciting or funny or interesting or creative moments. And so there's lots and lots of content, I guess, and people are being really, I suppose, creative with the ways that they do things. And it just goes to show what we're capable of when we're faced with a struggle. You know, I remember when I was in Thailand and we covered obviously the boys in the cave, the wild boar team. It was a sad story. It was a dangerous situation for the boys, but it was a story about unity and the country coming together. And this is the same. It's a sad situation, but it's also a story about humankind coming together.
James, I've seen some of they are very inspiring and uplifting. So how did you come to have your hands on these stories? Or how did these stories come to you?
Well, we look, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on social media. We look for interviews that people do. Often it's easier for the newspapers sometimes to do interviews because we work in television and obviously people don't have television cameras at home, even if they have iPhones. But so, I mean, there's plenty of good news being collected by all sorts of news organizations around the world. But we just wanted to make it into like a 2 times a week like TV program. And specifically, I want to be able to speak to people about their experience. So if someone films a funny video, we don't just want to put the video on, we want to speak to the people who made the funny video. So yeah, we have a team of producers in New York. I work from home in London, and we do our best.
So what are among the stories that touch you the most?
I think there was a lovely story about a group of school children in Texas who decided to write letters to a hospital in New York, and where obviously, because New York is the epicenter, and they wrote all these letters. And what we decided to do was we got on a FaceTime and we got the doctors and the students to speak to each other and to thank the students for writing the letters. And the letters now have been published and they're going to lots of different hospitals in New York. So it's nice because you can bring people together. Another amazing one for me was a couple in New York, 105 years old and 95 years old. And they spoke to me about, you know, how to survive through difficult moments. And her name is Naomi Raplensky. She's a famous poet. And then she read me one of her poems. And to speak to a 105-year-old on Skype is a little bit difficult, but it was okay in the end.
Wow, it must be quite a challenge to interview someone who are 105 years old over Skype.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously she has poor hearing now because she's 105, but she was still full of spirit and energy, and it was a bit difficult. We had a lot of questions where I'd ask the question and I said, "How are you?" And then she thought I said, "How old are you?" So we had a funny moment like this.
And so far, James, how do Americans react to your story? Because right now the situation in New York, in America, is quite serious with COVID situation.
Well, people they like it because I think they need uplifting. You know, when it's difficult, when we're faced with these problems, it's nice to have moments of release and reflection and positivity, you know, because when we work in the news, often only the bad news is the headline. But there are good, positive moments, and I think Americans like to be reminded of it like anybody else. Even in New York, you know, there's so much creativity. This is one of the most creative, multicultural cities on earth, and they have so many good stories. And yeah, they like hearing about it.
What is the overall policy of ABC in reporting on this deadly virus? Any guidelines that you need to be very mindful about?
Well, obviously, for anything that's medical, ABC has our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Jen, and she has been leading the kind of medical information and medical news. And so any story that anyone hears or any government publishes about the crisis, the medical unit at ABC looks at it first. Anything that we gather from the internet, just like before this crisis, we have a user-generated content team. They verify videos. Like, for example, there was videos of Venice. People said there were dolphins in the water, but we have a team in New York that checks videos, and they found out that that was fake. So it's possible with this story that you can, if you want to find lots of stuff from the internet, that's great, but sometimes you have to be careful. So we have a team in New York that looks at everything and makes sure that if we say something, that it's true.
And you must be working from home for quite a while. How do you manage?
I like it. It's I spend a lot of my time flying around. I haven't spent this much time at home in like 3 years. This is where actually I do the report. I sit in my chair at home in my living room. We have some lights, which they gave me at work, and we just set it up. And actually, my boyfriend has to become like a professional cameraman because he has to use, he gets to use his camera, and then we film it and record it. So it's okay. It's quite fun.
Yeah, it's quite
James,
adventure.
James, I know you're in London right now, but President Trump has said he wants to reopen the country in May. So what do you think is the general mood of the American people on this?
I think the United States is having that debate. I think Britain is also having this debate. It's certainly true that there is concern about opening a country too early. A lot of people are worried about this because, you know, if you look at New Zealand, they decided to lock down for 1 month and they've had 1 death. If you look at Germany, they're locked down, they're not making plans to open up. South Korea, they had a long lockdown. And so I think if you look at countries where there has been success in beating coronavirus, they're the countries that had long lockdowns and lots of testing. And I think a lot of people would be concerned that the lockdown would end before all of the testing had taken place. But at the same time, people also understand that our economies have to function. And I think particularly in Britain and America, there is real concern about the economy crashing, and a long period of no economic growth is very, very bad. So you have to balance these two things. I think in this country, that debate about when we open up is going to continue, and the same in America. But the leadership in both countries says that they're taking medical advice. So whatever the medical advice is, I suppose, has to be followed.
And that's part of the interview which was broadcast online on Thai PBS World Tonight. You can watch us every day from Monday to Friday at 7 p.m. And Kun Thep Chayong joined me online from home. And that's all from Thai PBS World Tonight.